Thank you for joining us at New York Small Pharma's first episode of our free online speaker series, Cannabis, Consciousness, and the Environment. Tonight's episode will be on cannabis and climate change. And this 1 hour episode will be just enough to dip our toes into this very complex topic. So we're going to be posting in the chat links to places where you can go for more information, and you can always come to our website for information as well. That would be newyorksmallpharma.org, nysmallpharma with an F.org. So this evening, New York, just to let you know, New York Small Pharma is a charitable organization, and we survive on donations, sponsor funding, and good-hearted volunteers, and we accept all three at all times. So don't be shy. Feel free to jump in and donate, or contact us if you want to volunteer, or if you want to partner with us for sponsoring or to organizing in your community. We love to hear from our members. And I want to go over tonight's format. We're going to be first speaking with our president of the board, Donna Burns, who will give you a little bit of a background about New York Small Pharma, the work that we've done with New York's cannabis law, a little bit about the cannabis law, and then we're going to move on to our expert panel of regenerative farmers who are going to be speaking with you here today. And I'm going to introduce each one individually, and they will each speak for 5 to 7 minutes. Once all panelists have spoken, we're all going to rejoin back on screen, and then we're going to be taking your questions. So please feel free to submit your questions in the chat, and I will try to get to all of them before the evening is out. We are so honored to have these panelists here tonight, all of whom are representing themselves and speaking about their own personal views, not necessarily the views of New York Small Pharma, and we encourage them to share from their perspective. Of course, except for our president, Donna Burns, who will be speaking about New York Small Pharma and representing New York Small Pharma. So Donna is a plant lover and is a lawyer who has practiced in DC for 40 years until the Hudson River Valley wilderness called her out here, and we're lucky that she came. And she's been an incredible leader for New York Small Pharma and really leading our team to work with lawmakers to where we were able to leave an indelible fingerprint on environmental oversight in the cannabis law. So please welcome Donna Burns.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm really excited that we're doing this series of conversations on cannabis, consciousness, and the environment. And really, I can't think of a better day than Earth Day. It's so fitting for this launch. And thanks to the hard work of everybody at NY Small Pharma, our board members, past and present, our founder, our volunteers, our supporters, everybody's here tonight because it's because of all the hard work and support that we were able to change the conversation and change the consciousness of so many people around cannabis, especially the lawmakers. New York's cannabis law reflects years of hard work, education, and outreach to make sure that folks knew that this cannabis plant is more than just what people thought a drug. It's a way to regenerate the earth. It's a way to regenerate communities. And we help connect the dots between environmental degradation and destruction and the adverse impacts on communities of color and low-income communities, the same communities that have been mostly disproportionately impacted by the racist and misguided war on drugs. We raise consciousness about how small farms and small local businesses can revitalize local economies and really give people a sustainable way of life. And we spread awareness of how environmentally healing cannabis grown outdoors can help our planet, and especially in contrast to the very destructive indoor industrial grow operations that we've seen elsewhere in so many jurisdictions. Responding to our efforts, and really it's with your support, the law now specifically includes a clear commitment to protect the environment and improve the state's resiliency to climate change. Those are the exact words from the law. There's a consideration for potential licensees in the licensing process to make sure, to see what they're going to be doing to increase climate resiliency and minimize or eliminate adverse environmental impacts, including water and energy usage, carbon emissions, waste, pollutants, harmful chemicals, and single-use plastics. And the cultivation regulations now are going to be guided by standards that relate to sustainable, organic, and regenerative practices. The law, in response to our efforts, reflects a focus on farming, not just small farmers and distressed farmers, which is the language of the law, but most notably, folks who've not been in farming, people who have been underrepresented in farming, and they really are going to have an opportunity to get into this business, and that is huge. We also were successful in changing something that was up until the last minute going to be included in the law, which is that all medical cannabis had to be indoor only grown. And we were successful in getting that language struck. We worked very hard, and now the law reflects a desire to have small and micro businesses really be an important part of this industry, not just letting big canna come in and take over. And in the final days, and we had many, many meetings, we were able to press very hard on ensuring that home cultivation, personal home grow, would become part of this law. And I can tell you, we really made it clear to the governor's office in particular how important that is to the people of this state. Now, as wonderful as this law is, our work is far from done, because the fact is the regulations are going to be crafted over the months and years to come. And that's going to make the difference between whether or not this law meets its potential or whether or not these become just words and we go the way of other jurisdictions. And so we're going to be back at it, and we look very much for your support. But for right now, let's just sit back and enjoy this victory and enjoy this wonderful panel that we have put together for you today. So thank you very much for being here tonight and for your support. Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Donna. So first up, I would like to introduce Brian Farmer, who is also a member of New York Small Pharma. Brian is the Director of Certification Services for the Cannabis Conservancy, and he's part of a team that has developed regenerative production standards for the cannabis industry called Sun and Earth. Brian, welcome.
Thanks, Nicole. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad all of you could make it. When I was thinking about what I wanted to do on Earth Day, it was really to focus in on the three pieces that we were going to consider today to kind of start the conversations that we're going to have ongoing in this platform. Consciousness, cannabis, and regeneration and climate resiliency, all of those pieces. It's a huge conversation, and I feel like I'm just going to lay out a few points from my perspective, doing the work that I've been doing, developing certifications and working with growers all over the country, and as a grower myself. So the first piece, consciousness. This is where it really starts. We can't change anything unless we change our consciousness. Being aware of our impacts in the world and educating ourselves. And we feel like part of our organization's mission is really to work on that education piece. And this really, especially in this circumstance, includes how we relate to those who have been negatively impacted by the insane policies of prohibition and oppression with cannabis, but more broadly as a part of industrial, social, and economic systems, which kind of drive where we are now. And I was thinking about this today, and there's going to be a lot of tumult and turmoil with all of this. And for me, compassion for all of us is really key as we move forward with these kind of radical shifts in culture as it relates to this plant. And the plant told me to tell you that. So that's the power there. And, in the context of cannabis in our culture, we have to, understand that we live in an incredibly intense commercial culture that drives our conversations here. And we really have to consider what our impacts personally are as a part of this mix. What do we know? What don't we know? Which is, for a lot of people, a much bigger piece of this, about how the plant is grown, all of the intricacies of what an industry for cannabis means. And unless you're growing your own, there's a lot of questions about the impacts of that production So it's important to understand how that plant changes your whole concept of your piece in the industrial commercial culture. I think it's really important to start from a place of empowerment here, because industrial culture tends to disempower people and just make them consumers. So a couple of things I was thinking of. We really have to be proactive here as things develop in what we call the industry, especially here in New York. And I would say there's a couple things you can do, but there are many. I'll mention two here. Number one, always question the motives and models of the dominant commercial culture. Brands, greenwashing, kind of the latest trend, the latest strain or cultivar, and these commercial models. Why can't we, buy cannabis along with our veggies at the farmer's market? Why is that? There are big questions here. The next thing is something that I have worked with people all over the country on, as these different markets are growing, and it's trying to get people to ask these questions when they walk into their retailer of cannabis. Do you have any certified cannabis? Do you sell organic cannabis? Is this cannabis sun grown? How is it grown? Ask those questions and see what happens. That's because the choices that you are the things that impact. It's kind of like buy the change you want to see. If you want to see a certain kind of production and value in that plant, you have to drive that as a consumer, because that's a key piece of this. So that's kind of that change around your consciousness piece, and just coming to grips with how you're thinking about it. The next is cannabis. Okay. A deep history here, which we can't go into tonight in detail, but hopefully we will in the future. It's been grown outdoors for millennia successfully. There's thousands of cultivars globally in all types of environments, from the high Tibetan Plateau, which is where the plant originated, to the Congolese jungle. It's a strong and widely adaptable plant. It grows outside in many different environments. So it's important to understand that as a given. A really important thing I wanted to bring up here around this plant is how the preferences for what we desire as cannabis consumers has developed in the broad understanding. Historically, the preferences for cannabis have been extremely varied depending on geography, social use, whether you're using flower or the seed or the fiber. There are so many different ways the plant can be used. In our current context, it's been narrowed down to a very few kind of metrics that you're dealing with as a part of commercial culture. And it's, and in many discussions, it's boiled down to that indoor-outdoor kind of conversation, which is a piece of it. And we'll get into that in further discussions. But some of those arguments are, driven by the commercial culture. The indoor-outdoor arguments are kind of shaped by decades of indoor production and cultivars that are suited to those techniques. And that's what consumers know by default. And it's the primary driver, has been, behind breeding and what you do with that. So it's tended toward high THC content and bag appeal, the way it looks. So it's limited the possibilities for thousands of cultivars out there. And the consumer is really being given limited options. So as we think about the impacts of it, we also have to think about, how the producers are thinking about what they're growing and consumer demand. Typically, you'll hear, oh, indoor is stronger, it looks better. but who decides what better is in this context? Is high THC the only metric that matters? I think that's increasingly changing, but it's been the dominant force in the industry for a long time. Typically, the arguments around outdoor are many, which our organization is really pushing, but there's much greater plant expression, terpene profiles, more nuanced kind of aspects related to the climate, the soils, all of those things. But this is a much more nuanced discussion that we're going to have in the future. So the third piece is regeneration, climate resiliency. There are many different ways of talking about this. But to put it bluntly, sun-grown is the key. And please check those links in the chat to find out about some more information related to all of this. So sun-grown is the key, but sun-grown is not always an option. Given your geographic and cultural circumstances, remember, when we talk about regenerative, it's much bigger than just agriculture. Regeneration and resiliency are not strictly about agriculture. It's about how to truly empower and enrich communities, human, animal, plant communities, and reimagining where we're going to go with that and the transitions is going to be a long conversation. So we all need to be patient with each other. I always give big respect to cultivators who were forced to grow indoors and work with the plant all these years and developed immense body of knowledge around the plant and growing in that context. But we have to understand that indoor mass production is a luxury that the planet can't afford. There's tremendous commercial pressure to maintain the current models. Folks have a lot of money invested in all of this and are really going to keep pushing for this. And it'll continue to be a driving force unless it's tempered by consumer demand for sun-grown, locally grown herb. This is critically important because the industry is not going to change until the consumer puts the pressure on there. I've learned this after years of kind of working with all of this. So this is a really good opportunity to re-examine all of these pieces of the current model and try and reimagine models that have historically worked, throw out the ones that are not going to work for us in terms of resiliency. Cooperative ventures among small stakeholders rather than big corporate top-down concentration of wealth type models needs to be the push. And if we can support that through our consumer choices, that's really important. Finally, if we're going to talk about these wholesale changes, we also have to talk about the structural shifts and all of those things that are going to impact the communities there. So there's going to be fallout and there's going to be new opportunities for communities who haven't had those before. So we need to consider all of those pieces. This has to be a much larger ongoing conversation, and I look forward to it. Happy Earth Day and support your local cannabis grower. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Brian. Just a reminder to all the panelists to try to stay within the time limit so that we can have plenty of time for questions from
Sorry.
No, that was super informative. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to listen to all of it. And I hope that we can delve into much of it deeper in the question time. So now I have the great honor of introducing you to Amy Hepworth. Amy is a 5th generation farmer. She's an owner and operator of a 550-acre organic farm called Hepworth Farms. And she's been the owner and operator since 1982. She's also part of the Hempire State Growers, and she has a Bachelor of Science in Pomology from Cornell University. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, happy Earth Day. Thank you for having me. So we're here on a day to discuss this wonderful plant in relationship to climate resiliency and our community And this plant, grown outdoors, is one of the most powerful experiences because it's got so much leaves, and it's the way it takes the sun in and takes that CO2 in and transports it into the ground at such an efficiency. It's actually a carbon sequester even more powerful than the forest. It's pretty an amazing plant. So definitely needs to be grown outside. It's going to be definitely beautiful in your yard. You're going to love to have it. So the fight to bring it outside to our communities and have a homegrown, and sourcing your local is very important. Know your source. Agriculture plays a very important part in climate resiliency. So it's Earth Day, and all these things come into play. So on our farm, we practice the whole lives of systems approach, which is this system that is all interconnected, and you're paying attention to the plant and the entire system. So what I'm saying is that this plant, with its amazing ability to take in the sun and sequester the carbon and put it into the soil, which then the carbon goes into the soil, makes available for the plants as food, and with all the biological action in a whole life systems approach, you're really trying to just force as much things that are alive, you want them to stay alive. So, and you want to encourage alive. So all those carbon that got into the soil and all the microbes are going to bring it into food, into another plant, and you're going to eat it. So this plant plays a role in helping our environment when grown outdoors. So it's a great agricultural crop, and we want it in our community. So I just want to say that change is slow, and as an organic grower and focusing on it, it takes time. So it's up to each and every one of us to impact climate resiliency, because change is slow, and our consciousness needs to be able to understand the importance of understanding the truth and understanding how to make the planet better for those that haven't been born, and to be in good relation with all our relation. This is the key to climate resiliency. It's change by individual action. So each and every one of us can do our own part. And in agriculture, it's kind of hard for people to understand, because it's really hard to feed all the people, and we plow the lands, and but all the communities can grow this plant and do it in the best way possible. And farming has improved, and this is Earth Day, and we've gone out of the green revolution, and we're awakening the biological revolution, and farmers are now talking about their soil, and we have something to be grateful for, because after 40 years of working really hard, we've made great changes. And if everybody understands the importance of how important it is that we all take part in this climate change resiliency, each and every one of us will make a really big impact in this change. And this plan has an amazing, we really want it to affect the economy by it not going to just the money. We want it to stay in our communities, and we want it to be in the local shops, because it is a very abundant and a powerful plant. So I think I'll wait for all the questions, because I know there's a lot of time, and I'm happy to talk more and for a long time around the plant. I grew it. We grew 200 acres. It was an amazing experience. We still have it. And we grew another one. And so I would like to understand how important agriculture is in changing resiliency. And I want you to know that there's a lot of people for 40 years working to change it, and change is happening. We're teaching farmers about keeping their soils alive, and how important is soil. It's so important. It's everything to the planet. It is such a powerful metabolic action. And without a healthy soil, we really won't be able to influence climate change. I mean, we need to just focus on that as growers. And I want you to know that I'm really committed to it. And I'm really committed to, and our organization is also. Yeah. Thank you, because I don't know what time it is, but I'm sure that I've taken up enough time.
You did great. Thank you so much, Amy. I appreciate it. I always learn so much when you speak, and I'm always filled with hope when I hear you speak. So thank you.
You're welcome, and pleasure.
So next we're going to go to Andi Novick. Andi is the founder of New York Small Pharma, and she's also a regenerative farmer herself. And she is a fountain of knowledge and expertise, and she is the most passionate advocate for the cannabis plant itself. Welcome, Andi.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here. Let's see, I wasn't expecting to go last, so I'm trying not to repeat. I'm really proud of all of our efforts. When I first went to Albany 3 years ago and mentioned this was a plant, people looked at me like I had 3 heads. Plant wasn't even a word in the law. And look how much in 3 years we've changed things. We've really, really moved the needle on that one. But today is Earth Day, and we're supposed to be talking about the survival of the species on this planet. And given what we had asked for from the legislature towards the goal of reducing carbon emissions in the atmosphere, this legislation really actually failed miserably from that perspective. We wanted the legislature to recognize that while it's trying to cut carbon emissions from existing industries in New York State, it set a goal to reduce carbon emissions to 0. It certainly shouldn't be opening its arms to a brand new industry that would undermine that goal. And that's what we said to the legislature. We wanted the law to mandate that all cannabis be grown outdoors regeneratively, because outdoors regeneratively, as you'll hear, can really save the planet, whereas the indoor growing, well, I'm going to talk about the indoor growing. The indoor growing, the indoor cannabis cultivation industry is one of the absolute worst industries in the nation in terms of carbon pollution, in terms of the amount of greenhouse gas that's emitted. And there's absolutely no reason to be growing the plant indoors. We only grew it indoors because it was illegal and we were trying to hide from the authorities, right? I mean, that's what it was about, but now it's legal. So it's totally ridiculous to still be growing it indoors. And it's such a destructive industry. It should be illegal to grow it indoors. It's certainly immoral. And as Donna mentioned, they tried to ban outdoor growing, the medical cannabis industries, and that should tell you something about this industry. But we prevailed on that. And now you're going to have choices about whether you can buy cannabis that's grown indoors or outdoors. And that's what Brian was talking about. It's really important to vote with your wallet now, and to support us as we move forward with regulations to try to make sure that there's a supply of outdoor sun-grown regenerative cannabis. By the way, I've heard that people are told that the cannabis grown indoors is better. That's a lie. And you should really follow the money on where that rumor might have started. But okay, back to Earth Day. Earth Day, as it was envisioned in 1970, when it began, was and is about raising public consciousness about the state of our planet, calling attention to those industries that extract and exploit the planet's limited resources, indifferent to the suffering that it's caused to humans and other life forms, and ultimately the very destruction of our Earth. Well, not our Earth, life on Earth. Earth will go on, we won't go on. So what does such an Earth-destroying industry look like in this context, you ask? Well, the indoor cannabis cultivation industry is such a glutton for energy. It's 50 to 200 times more energy intensive than your typical office building. An indoor grow system for just 4 plants sucks up as much energy as 29 refrigerators running full time. It's such a bad industry that a recent study found that Colorado's indoor cannabis warehouses produce 30% more greenhouse gas emissions than the state's coal mining industry. And the simple truth, as I said, is there's no reason to be growing it indoors. But now that it's legal, and particularly given the superior option that we have, which is growing it outdoors under the sun, regeneratively employing climate healing practices that can actually restore the balance of carbon in the air. And we call these climate healing practices organic regenerative farming practices. Regenerative farmers grow cover crops to enrich the soil, and we don't use synthetic pesticides, but instead we create a permaculture in which we invite the good bugs to come and eat the bad bugs. There's a lot more to that, but suffice it to say, for now, growing regeneratively will be pulling the excess carbon out of the atmosphere and sequestering it in the soil where it's going to stay because we don't disturb the soil with excessive tilling. This ability to remove the carbon from the air is critical because just reducing carbon emissions, it's too late for that. We're too far gone. We have to affirmatively pull that carbon out of the air. It's only been a century that chemical companies and big ag have taken our limited resources and poisoned the land and the air and the food with their harmful industrial practices. And the corporate indoor cannabis industry is just the latest player on the block to follow the mold of take, and not care about the consequences as long as everyone's making money there. But this way of thinking, this is what's annihilating our ability to live on the only planet that can support us. And it's this way of thinking that requires a paradigm shift in consciousness if we're to restore the health of our planet. So I'm also going to talk about consciousness for a minute, as everyone else had. It's not a coincidence that it's the cannabis plants that is trying to shift our consciousness before it's too late, because cannabis has the unique ability to alter consciousness. This plant is really trying to help us. It is such a caring and nurturing plant. It can heal so many cancers and many illnesses and diseases that we suffer from. It's good for our brains, it's good for our bodies. We know that the cannabinoids in the cannabis plant bind automatically with the cannabinoid receptors that are abundant in our brain and in our bodies, and that's what can reduce inflammation, can protect us from deterioration, memory loss, inflammation, particularly as we age. She's compassionate. She relieves all our aches and our pains. And she helps us to expand our consciousness by encouraging us to be present in the moment and to be reflective. And so let's get conscious and reflective just for a moment, because I want you to consider the choices we're not going to have. Not all cannabis is equal. New York's market will include the superior, regeneratively grown, nutrient-dense, pure, healthy cannabis, as well as the corporate produced stuff. I want to ask you now to just consider that as you're being reflective. Which cannabis do you want to put in your body? And hopefully this will answer the question of, does it really make a difference and which one's better? You have your sun-loving, consciously grown cannabis plants tended with home-brewed organic teas, our own co-created manure, alfalfa meal, organic straw mulches, sea kelp. Regenerative growers plant cover crops of clover and vetch and oats and sweet pea to feed and regenerate the soil. Our plants are free of noxious chemicals, and the plants are surrounded by trees and flowers and buzzing bees and singing birds, while being energized by the sun over a 7-month period. Now you contrast that with the poor cannabis plants that are forced to grow indoors in sterile, windowless warehouses, deprived of sun and fresh air, tended by people in hazmat suits spraying pesticides and growth hormones, forced to flower in only a 3-month period under artificial lighting. So when you do stop now and reflect, who would drink indoor wine? Who wants to smoke a Cuban cigar in a warehouse, grown in a warehouse? In all seriousness, when we stop and think about this, we can change our consciousness. And you know in your heart, which is where your true intelligence lies, that this is the paradigm shift we need. It has to start with you and you and you, because our leaders aren't leading on this one. But you can change the paradigm by the choices that you make, and that is what Earth Day is about. So thank you for being here and learning together, and I hope you have really good questions that we can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Andi, for that very inspirational and passionate discussion about some of the issues between indoor and outdoor. So now I'm going to invite the panel to join me on screen here, and I'm going to ask some of the questions that we're receiving. So I'm going to, while our team is putting the panel on screen, I'm going to start asking questions. All right, so the first question that we received, and this is anyone in the panel who would like to respond to it. How can we make sure that all the Black, Indigenous, people of color who are farmers and crafters get in on the opportunity and get the help that they need to get started? That might be a good policy question for Donna.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. I don't think we know exactly how the regulations are going to play out, but one of the things that the law does say is that at least the goal is that 50% of the licenses should go to equity applicants. And that's really important. And equity applicants includes not only people of color, it includes women, it includes distressed farmers, it's veterans, it's a fairly broad group. And we hope and expect and will be pushing for regulations and support structures that encourage and promote these individuals and groups as licensees, because if we don't get that, then it's just lip service, because a lot of those individuals have not historically had access to capital and access to the support systems that they need to make sure that they can succeed in business. So setting up these supportive structures is critically important. And the law does earmark some of the tax revenue to help with education and outreach efforts. But I think it's going to take more than that. I think we're going to really need to make sure that the public's voice continues to be heard, so that the regulations reflected, and that the Cannabis Control Board and the Office of Cannabis Management hears this message, that this is what New Yorkers want.
Thank you, Donna. So the next question that I have is, this is from a viewer from Queens who doesn't have access to urban areas to grow, and they're interested in knowing where they can come volunteer upstate to learn more about cannabis business from cultivators.
I can weigh in on that, and probably Amy can too. It's a great question, because one of the things that is going to become critical, especially in a state like New York, is connecting those areas where you actually can grow outside with people who want to learn those techniques if they haven't been exposed to them before, and access to education around that and places to grow. And kind of related to that first question is, we really have to envision new models that connect rural and urban areas, so that there can be an exchange of information, and in a commercial context, the potential to grow outside, educate people who want to go that route about how to do it, and then connect with the commercial entities, small scale retailers in urban areas who want to sell that sun-grown regenerative product. So there's huge opportunities here to do that and include education as a, part of that question was about how to get educated. There's going to be, as we are hopefully envisioning it, a lot of opportunities for that. There are already lots of farms where you can come learn some of the techniques that aren't just specific to cannabis, but will definitely apply as we move into that over the next couple of years. So, and hopefully, well, I know for sure that New York Small Pharma will be a part of that. Hopefully connecting people in that way.
I think Brian froze up a little bit there, but I think what he was trying to say was that New York Small Pharma, as we move along,
get in touch.
Going to try to help educate people on regenerative practices and farming. So please get in touch with us. Amy, did you want to add anything to the answer to that question?
Well, I think it's important for the industry to take all the different approaches. It's very important for the small farmer in all those communities, like how the organic farm movement works. And also to recognize that there's also a play for New York State in playing in growing this plant for people to have access to medicine, and it's very regulated. So you need quite a sophisticated business model to be able to provide high potency, good extraction, and good brand for people to access this plant. And in that model, you can have a worker co-op where you profit share. So people of all, like our mission statement includes our workers, who our organization is 90 to 95% people of color. And so I think there's many opportunities to do it in awesome different ways. As long as we keep that consciousness and that mission statement that we're talking about, we can influence this together on many different levels.
Thank you. Good point. They're very good points. So this next question is more of a statement, and you guys might understand it better than I, and want to speak to it. But we have a question, we have a statement that says type 2 cultivars are starting to be grown and bred more recently. Type 2 and cultivars that express in more varied terpenes and cannabinoids, such as CBN, CBG, as well as CBD and THC in similar concentrations, much like early breeding stock and land races of the 60s and 70s. We need more of this, as it is more complete medicine than THC or CBD only. Would you guys like to speak to that? I see lots of heads nodding.
I'm not going to hog it, but I would love to talk to whoever gave that question. You want to say something, Andi? It's a huge interest of mine, is working with landrace species here to develop, regionally adapted Northeast strains that are based on some of these that actually stress some of the things that you talked about. But I'll let Andi jump in there on that too, if you want.
And Andi, just maybe tell people what landrace is.
Okay, landrace is, as I said in my little spiel. Is Andi going to jump in there?
No, go
okay,
ahead, Ryan. This is your thing. Do it. You do it.
I'm just so excited about it. Now, landrace means typically when you talk about a landrace species, it's one that comes from a place where it's either grown wild or has been cultivated for a long time. So that, obviously includes the place where it originated, the Hindu Kush, India, Nepal, Tibet, but also all the places over the thousands of years that it has been grown, Africa, more recently in the Americas. So those strains that have been growing there for hundreds of years that have then been developed, as the questioner said, in the 70s, a lot of people got those and then started playing around with the genetics and interbreeding. And that's where we've gotten all the things that are now, Gorilla Glue and cheese and Kim Dog and all of these. All of those are what people have been playing with for the last 40 to 50 years to get to where we are now. But it's important to start working with those again, as the questioner said, to breed away from just the high THC stuff to a plant that's going to address very specific kinds and all of the cannabinoids that they mentioned in the question. Whoever you are, if you would reach out and shoot us an email, it'd be very interesting to chat.
I also find that the genetics are really exciting, and there's so many cannabinoids, and there's a lot going on in genetics, and it's really exciting. And we find that this plant speaks to different people in different ways. So there should be a really open-mindedness about the whole genetics, in the sense that there's so much going to happen in genetics. It's it is like the dawn of a new time, and it's really exciting because the plant can express itself in many, many different ways. And so I just want you to know that genetics is happening. And when you say genetics, it just means the inherent, plant's potential of what it's going to express. So it's really exciting. We just have so many different varieties that have different cannabinoids and terpenes. So it's exciting time. for genetics.
And I just want to add to that. You see the excitement on her face, and when Brian talks about it, this only happens with conscious outdoor growers. The alternative, I'm just pushing this again because we've got to all push for it. This is Amy making a choice what to grow. Amy, who's been farming lovingly for 40 years, or Brian. It's not some corporate banker who's telling people indoors, grow the fastest thing that grows the fastest. That's the easiest to grow for our purposes. We don't want anything too complicated. We want a homogenized, cheap strain that's going to make the greatest profit for us. We're not interested in all these other things. And so again, this is super, super important. They're not even comparable in outdoor and an indoor plant. And I hope that's getting through to people.
So there were a couple of questions. I'm going to lump some of them together. People were asking, are you a purist outdoor? What do you feel about greenhouses? What do you feel about starting plants with lights and then moving outdoor?
I can address that as a certifier, if you would like. So a big part of my work is with the Cannabis Conservancy, and we've developed certification standards around that address all of these issues. Even in the regenerative standard that we developed, you are allowed to use some artificial light in the propagation process, but in the starting of, but not after that. And then in our Cannabis Conservancy standards, we have an eco standard, which is a sun-grown standard, but deals with a lot more of the metrics. So you can certainly grow in a greenhouse, or we have certified grows that have a greenhouse, very high-tech greenhouse, and they also grow 2 acres of regeneratives as a part of their business in the Northeast, so they're able to grow year-round. And we've also developed an indoor standard to help people who are growing indoors to dial it in so that if they are going to use that model, they're doing it as efficiently as possible. So me personally, I am attached to getting people to move outdoors as much as possible and grow in the sun. But there are ways to address that. Greenhouses in the Northeast are going to be a very important part of the production scheme, just because we're here and it gets cold and there's less light, and we need it for season. February to November, you got to have hoop houses. So there are ways to extend the season with cannabis in the same way. Just we need a lot more work with it because we haven't been able to do it legally until very recently.
Well,
it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I still think we should be focused on outdoors. It's a very abundant plant. It's amazing how much one plant can actually provide for any family. I mean, and then you get to tinker with it. You get to dry it, and then you get to make medicines or teas. And so I don't know, it's cyclical. And I love growing outdoors and being a part of a natural cycle. And this plant being in that position to be released to the people again is such a big opportunity. But I don't like to judge anybody around what they do. So if that's the way they have to do it, but personally, I just love it outdoors. So I'm not a big greenhouse person. You can start them inside, but let them be outside, please, as much as possible. They do so much good for the environment. And in the winter, we don't like to heat it in the Northeast. It makes smoke and consumes energy. Try to adapt to a seasonal, in-season vibration, I think is the healthiest way, personally.
And just because this comes up all the time, like, oh my God, if we're growing outdoors in the Northeast, we can't grow year round the way we can indoors. But the truth is, you grow your crop and then you dry it and you cure it. It's going to last you the whole year. First of all, we could get 2 crops, in the Northeast. But even with one crop, it's not like tomatoes that are going to go bad. You properly dry it and cure it, and you've got your supply for the year, and then you grow it again. It's just more misinformation that we have to grow it indoors so we can grow it all year.
I just have to say, it's such an important plant by light that it actually matures by light unless it's autoflower. So you actually have varieties that just mature by the light, how much light. So I don't know about growing 2 crops. I know that you can grow varieties outdoors and have them harvest at different times. But in the Northeast, it seems like we don't have a lot of time to do many grows outside, but just to be technical.
Yeah, I was meaning, not for you who have so much farming, but for people who are just sort of paying attention to a smaller amount, you could do light deprivation outside and you could get 2 crops. If you want.
Really? Oh, wow, that's innovative. I can't wait to learn about that.
I've done that. It's a lot of work unless you buy one of those automatic systems.
So
Sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
I'm going to sneak a question in. So listening to this and talking about the cyclical and following the rhythm of the plant, what is the response then to people that say that they're breeders and that they have this mother plant that they have to keep under light all year round in order to keep the mother plant going? What's the answer to that?
That's reality.
That's
Right,
reality.
but maybe Amy or Brian could talk to the value of seeds as opposed to clones, right?
Oh yeah, I'd love to say something on seeds. I noticed that growing by a seed and its sprouting and the whole process of growing by the seed and the difference between growing clones and seeds is very significant. The problem is that you have chances of things. When you have a clone, you're like almost guaranteed to that variety. So if you get really into it, like most of the growers, homegrown growers are very attached to their getting it from the clone because it's female. And if you plant by seed, you have to be very experienced for it not to be male if you're interested in the female flower. So there's a lot of growing information. And so from seed, there's something very special that happens, definitely. And the clone gives you a security because it's a cutting from a female. So you're extending that one plant over and over, but that does require some attentive indoor. It doesn't happen. It's a specific talent. So you have to know where your seeds are too, source your seeds, because you could get really disappointed early if you don't know what your genetics are in your seed. And you really do have to tell the difference if you want good smokable of such or good feminine flower. You really do need to be able to know that it's a female. And if it's a male, you have to take it out. So you have to grow a few extra because you're going to cull some and make tea from it when you do. Because there's male and female.
And the female is the smokable.
Yeah, that's Sensimelia, and you can't have a male around it. If there's a male around it, it'll pollinate it. So if you want your own seeds, then that's fair game. You're going to hurt your neighbors around them, because once a male plant goes bust in the air, it can go up to 10 miles and it can seed somebody's nice Sensimelia. So we have to be a cooperative bunch and learn and talk and communicate so we can learn to plant and be good growers, even in our backyard, because it actually influences your neighbor's yard. And it's a lot of effort to make a beautiful female flower, and the male flower has to be identified in order for it not to pop and pollinate. And when you pollinate the female flower, it creates seeds. So it's a very delicate balance and a lot of communication there and a lot of education to spin this out correctly so that people can actually enjoy a good Sensimelia. You have to learn how to grow a good Sensimelia. Yeah.
Thank you. So this next question I'm going to offer to Donna because I think it's a policy question. So will a co-op or microbusiness cannabis license allow a small farm to offer sales at farm market or open as a consumption coffee shop, much like a brew pub? Are these details yet to be finalized?
That's a great question. Thank you, Nicole. The way the microbusiness is written right now in the law, you are really fully vertically integrated. You can go from seed all the way to sale. So in fact, it's one of the few exceptions where no locality can tell you where you can sell. It's you and the ROs, the medical folks, the microbusinesses are permitted to sell directly to consumers. As to the consumption, that is something that we push very hard for, and we will continue to push hard for in the regulations. Right now, there's a separate license for on-site consumption, like the coffee shop that the questioner asked about. That said, it's really going to be up to the fleshing out the promulgation of the regulation to see whether or not, let's say I had a micro business, I grew my plants, I can sell them to the public, and I have my 3 acres of land, and I have some picnic tables over there, and people come and consume it. Would it be unlawful for me not to be running a shop, an on-site consumption, but to allow folks on my land to consume whatever they want? You know, they can smoke cigarettes, they can have a picnic, they can smoke cannabis. And that's a question that has not been answered yet. And it is our intent and desire to make sure that the answer is yes, that you should be able to allow folks to come to your micro farm or your micro business and consume the product that they purchase from you. And as to co-ops, they're actually a different license, the way that the law is structured. And so they do not have the vertical integration that micro businesses have. The size of micro business is up in the air. You know, typically we're talking about 2,500 or 5,000 square foot of canopy space. How that gets calculated is up in the air. But so this is kind of the work that I had mentioned earlier that still needs to be done. But you know, it's our intent that any small or micro business should be able to go from seed to sale. And if folks want to come to their little farm, right next door to me, I have a brew farm, a brewery, and they can brew their beer and sell it to the folks who want to buy it, and they can sit there and drink it. And it should be the same for cannabis, and that's what we're going to continue to push for.
Nicole.
So thank you. So I have some bad news. We're coming to the end of our hour. So we're going to there are a lot of really good questions that I am sad that we're not gonna be able to get to, but what I'm going to offer, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we're going to set up a page on the website. We'll put Ask a Farmer, and we're going to put the answers. We're going to put these questions to our panelists, and we'll get these questions answered on our website. So please come visit New York Small Farmers. But I'm going to ask one last question. And then I'm going to give some closing remarks. But this question, I'm also inserting it because I don't know how to choose from the very good ones left. And the reason I'm asking it is because I want to hear from you guys to tell our audience and our viewers, like, what can they do? Because home grow will eventually be legal in New York. And also as consumers who are out there buying, what is it that an individual can do to contribute to climate change reduction, to contribute to getting this industry in the right direction?
Well, it's more of the same. I mean, you can grow your own and you can do it regeneratively, and hopefully small farmer will be able to start teaching people to assist them to do it. And you can work with small farmer to impact what's going to happen with the regs, because as we all know, the devil's in the details. And I fully expect what Donna said. I mean, I fully hope that we will fit into the mold that breweries have and be able to have all of the rights that they have. But it was hard to get that this go around. It was enough that we got it recognized as a plant. So that's where we'll be moving. But we need the pressure, right? The pressure from the industry is huge, right? If people are willing to do the work and commit to this last push, it won't be the last one, but the next push to be able to create what I call cannabisaries, what I hope to be a law. You know, like there's a brewery and there's a winery. If you add ERY to the end of it, you get to have the farm gate. You get to have all the things that a small farm business can have. But we need the help. It's just a few of us. So work with us, and we'll also hopefully be teaching you how to grow your own. You can do a huge amount growing regeneratively on your own land. You can reduce your carbon footprint by sucking up that carbon.
I just want to reiterate what Amy and Brian and Andy have said, because it's so important. You know, people need to vote with their dollars and also make their voice heard. The reason organic produce is so widely available in this country and compared to like 40, 50 years ago is because consumers want it. And when consumers make clear that they want healthy, organically grown cannabis, not certified organic, that's a different issue, but then it will be available because folks cater to what consumer demand is. And if we just sit back as a population and say, we'll just take this cannabis, I don't know how many folks here have ever been to a dispensary. You know, I, like many other New Yorkers, have driven over to Massachusetts at least once, and you get good, better, best. And that's your choice. But if you make it clear that you don't want that, you want something, you know, superior and variety and diversity, then that is what we'll see. So our voices really do matter here. So thank you.
Did any of the other panelists want to give any other responses to that before I close us for the evening?
I think everybody has a part to climate change, and you know, like what comes out of our car, the little gas pipe, it's really dangerous. So we all have to make little steps. We can't have everything that we want. What I'm saying is it takes a lot of restraint and change, individual change every day, making decisions not to put so much toothpaste on our toothbrush. It's really simple, but you got to change your consciousness to not consuming so much. We need to all make a difference in that part. That's what I have to say. Agriculture has a big job to do. Every person has a big job to do. This plant, we wanted to influence it and have a great part in this revolution of being conscious that humanity needs to become aware that our impact on our environment has consequences. So thank you.
Thank you. So we wish we could stay on for longer, but the good news is that we're going to continue to have these cannabis consciousness and the environment series with different episodes. So please come to our website, sign up for our newsletter. That's where you're going to hear about where the next series is and what the topic will be. That's where you'll find the answer to these questions. And as you've heard many times, the regulations are coming. That's where you're going to find out what are the issues and regulations and who you need to email and call to get a change. So, and also, please remember that we do operate completely on donations and for the generous support of our supporters out there. So, and one last thing, I do really want to say thank you so much to Tony Peroni and Chad McAvoy. Tony is a board member and Chad is a great, one of our great volunteers at New York Small Pharma that have been working behind the scenes to do the technology and make us look good. So thank you very much to them and to all of our panelists for joining us today, and for all of you, happy Earth Day and good evening.
Good evening.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Ciao.
you.